Welcome to The Partial Historians.
We explore all the details of ancient Rome.
Everything from political scandals to love affairs, the battles waged, and when citizens turn against each other. I'm Dr. Rad.
And I'm Dr. G. We consider Rome as the Romans saw it, by reading different ancient authors and comparing their accounts.
Join us as we trace the journey of Rome from the founding of the city.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of The Partial Historians. I am one of your hosts, Dr. G.
And I am Dr. Rad. Relieved that you know who you are, Dr. G.
This time. For once.
Call back to an episode a couple of months ago.
Yes, well, the thing is... So we are tracing the history of Rome from the founding of the city. And we are in what I think is going to be a very exciting year, because we're going to be talking about 406 BCE.
We certainly are. Before we get into that, of course, Dr. G, I would like to recap where we were in 407. And I can do that pretty succinctly because not a huge amount happened in 407.
I was going to say, you really have to do the recap for 407 because I don't know anything.
Well, we got the hint that something was happening with Veii. It was very peaceful, very diplomatic, but Veii is once again being mentioned, which, okay, I mean, there's been some big conflicts with Veii and, issues with the Etruscans in the past, but it's been a little bit quieter for the last, couple of decades. But they did appear on the horizon in our last episode, but nothing very exciting really happened. And then we, of course, had the slaughter at Verugo, which I'm sure you'll remember because I know you hate that place name.
I do. I mean, it just doesn't roll off the tongue nicely.
Verugo. Yes. Verugo.
Stop that. Ew. I'm shivering. Okay, so Rome has this issue with Verugo.
It did.
And that's kind of it.
Yeah, basically they'd recently captured it and they were feeling very smug, and then it got captured back by the Volscians and the Aequians, and it wasn't a great look. It wasn't a great look because they probably could have stopped that from happening if they'd been a little bit more on the ball.
I was going to say, if they had sent a full military force.
Yeah, well, they sent a military force, but they were just late. So... It was kind of the issue that they took their sweet time, and that poor little garrison out there killed.
Well,
all dead.
Oh no!
I know.
Dear Marcia, I write to you as I die on this battlefield.
The blood is leaking from my veins, but my heart still pumps for you.
The romance.
I know.
All right. Well, I think that it is time then for 406 BCE.
Mm-hmm.
It's 406 BCE, and we have military tribunes with consular power. There are 4 of them, which is a pretty standard number at this point in time. We have Publius Cornelius Rutilius Cossus.
I believe we know that name from recent years.
Perhaps we do. Perhaps we do. Certainly the Rutilii Cossi as a group, as a sort of gens, and then that particular family line are well known at this point. And we also have Gnaeus Cornelius Cossus. So some more Cornelii in there. We also have a guy called Numerus or Gnaeus Fabius Ambustus. Numerus seems to be the more preferred of the praenomens here.
Okay.
Olivia might disagree. We'll see.
I'm not going to repeat my joke from last time.
Boo! And Lucius Valerius Potitus.
Another familiar name.
Yes, previously consular tribune in 414. And will also go on to hold that role in the future as well. Watch this space.
Okay.
So, what I can tell you so far is Potitus doesn't die.
Nice. Spoilers. Yeah.
And we also have a legate who has survived. So, a military legate, we don't really know what they do right now. They're in charge of
We don't know what
troops.
military tribunes do right now.
We don't really know a lot of what goes on right now. But here we are, and we have Gaius Servilius Ahala. And you will definitely recognize this name because he was a military tribune with consular power in 408 and 407. So as early as last year, he was hanging around.
So the Ahala definitely making a comeback through this particular man.
They are. They definitely are. So that's all the names that I've got. And I do have some details about this year, but I feel like Livy probably has a narrative to hook some of those details into. So I'm keen to see what he's got.
Okay, well, Dr. G, get ready to strap yourself in for what is going to be an epic year. So epic! I may need 2 episodes to tell you about it. And it's been a while. It's been a while since we've had a year, I think, quite this epic. I mean, 409, sure, some big developments, but this is action-packed.
Stuff happens.
Stuff does.
Wow.
Stuff does happen. It does indeed. Now, a lot of the stuff that happens is connected with Veii. So last episode, we talked about the fact that allegedly the truce between Veii and Rome that had been established in their previous conflict was running out. And so everyone was like, we've got to renew it. Got to get that lease happening again.
Hurry!
Yeah. But 406 is generally given in our ancient sources as the year in which war with Veii began again. Now.
Okay, that sounds momentous.
Yes. Now, look, it's not necessarily obviously all going to be the action of that war in this year because this is going to be a 10-year conflict, or so we are led to believe.
Oh, goodness. All right.
Yeah.
Strap myself in indeed.
Yeah. Now, look, obviously, as I highlighted last time, dates, the amount of time that the Romans are going to go to war, it's a little bit, it's all a little bit questionable at this point in time. Do they want it to go for 10 years because the Trojan War allegedly lasted for 10 years? Maybe. Who am I to say?
Are you telling me Rome views its conflict with Veii in Trojan War terms? It's Homeric in its scope.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of that. So I'm just highlighting that now just to begin what will be a constant warning. Every episode I'm going to have to say this from now on, that maybe the dates are off, maybe it didn't last this long, maybe it lasted longer. Who the hell knows? Certainly not us, and certainly not Livy.
Fair.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're starting in 406, a conflict that apparently is going to go all the way down to 396.
Okay.
So, because this is a big deal, I thought maybe we should do a little bit of a recap about Veii. Okay, So geographically, I know you're very well acquainted with where Veii is now because it is super close to Rome.
It is. So realistically, we're talking, it's less than 20 kilometers away from Rome centre proper.
Which in Australian terms is basically next door.
Well, and even in Italy, it's basically next door. Let's not kid ourselves. You could walk there on a good day and be like, oh, hey, guys, it's the Etruscans. They're completely different people.
Yeah, so because they're so close, it makes sense that they are constantly fighting these people because the Romans are constantly fighting all of their neighbours. But they, I suppose, having those Etruscan connections, I guess that makes them perhaps more ripe for conflict in some ways because, you know, the Etruscans are a major power. They're a major player. You know, there's glory to be won here, Dr. G.
Yeah, and Veii does have the capacity to leverage much more support than the neighbors in the other directions surrounding Rome at this point. So Rome has got this thing going on with the Volscii and the Aequii, who are kind of to the southeast-ish. And those people don't seem to be interconnected into a broader empire of sorts or a broader conglomerate. There's kind of like Latin peoples, and they're all kind of milling around in the same sort of area as Rome, but they're not necessarily power blocks, whereas Veii represents the most southern tip of Etrurian power. And the Etruscans are known for having quite a reach up through central into northern Italy.
Yes, exactly. And on a more local level, they being so close, they probably have control of some territory that'd be really handy for the Romans to have, not just so they can say, mine is bigger, but so they have control of, you know, like trade routes, you know, more access to resources that are pretty down close by.
Yes, it would be nice to knock Veii off its pedestal, wouldn't it, Rome?
Yes, it would. So just to do a bit of a recap of where we've been with Veii, because, okay, I'm sorry, I have to do a bit of spoilers. This is going to be the last of the big conflicts with Veii.
Oh, no! Close your ears, listeners.
Well, I didn't say who was going to win, but, I mean, you know, put two and two together. So this is going to be the last. So the first really big conflict with Veii, and I mean, obviously there's been issues with Etruscans, if we believe the sources, which we tend to because there's nothing else to do. There's obviously been some Etruscan questions in the regal period, notably thanks to Tarquinius Priscus, etc. But in terms of the Republic, there was a war with Veii that lasted from 483 to 474, and Veii definitely was pretty hot in that conflict, did pretty well for themselves. And this is the time period in which we have that very famous moment of the fabulous Fabians, Dr. G.
Yes, they were fabulous right up until the point where they all died.
Yeah, all apart from
But
one.
one.
Yeah. The one that would carry the name down through the centuries.
But you were the chosen one.
Exactly, yes. So that didn't end well for the Romans. The people of Veii got to keep Fidenae, which Rome always has its greedy little eyes on and that sort of thing. They'd been embarrassed, even though obviously the Fabians seem to have just like gone out on their own bat and been like, yeah, we'll just take our clients and our family and sort this out.
Sick, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. In spite of that, it's still embarrassing because they still obviously come from Rome, represent the Roman interests and that sort of thing. So that wasn't great. Then, more recently, and our listeners might remember this, we, of course, had the conflict over Fidenae, which flared up again in the 430s and the 420s, although the dates, of course, were super confusing.
Yes, this is one of those instances where all of the events around Fidenae seem to either happen at one time or they happened a completely different decade.
Yeah, exactly.
And nobody's really quite sure. I mean, but it happened. This is where Lars Tolumnius comes into play.
It is, yes. The Etruscan king.
Oh, I knew I remembered something about history.
Indeed. Slain on the battlefield. It's very sad. So that obviously was a pretty big thing because with the source material being so confusing, it seemed like that conflict was going on for like a good decade. And maybe it was. But certainly there was a lot of changing of allegiances with Fidenae being like, Fidenae was the hot potato that they were throwing backwards and forwards and was also trying to pick what was best for itself, which was very difficult with Rome and Veii being like, you should be with me.
I think they chose Veii and that made Rome mad.
It certainly did. It certainly did. So we've had that. But it's been fairly quiet, obviously, because of the way things ended. There was a truce and all. However, hostility is about to recommence, Dr. G, and it really all begins because the Senate in Veii are just so rude.
Really? What? Rude about what?
Well, okay, so
they don't want the new treaty? They don't want a renewal?
So, as we know, treaty's running out, Romans are dealing with this. The people of Veii seemed interested in this too. But they had asked the Romans for a little bit of, time out because they were dealing with some internal problems. When the Romans approached them in this year, allegedly, the Senate of Veii tells the Romans to get the hell out if they don't want a taste of what Lars Tolumnius had dished out to the Romans before. In other words, death.
Interesting. I wonder what provoked that.
I know. So the
Seems to have come out of nowhere, really.
I know, they were so nice to each other last year, and yet here we are. Maybe they were being strategic. Maybe they just wanted a little bit more time to prepare.
Lure them in.
Exactly. False pretenses. Anyway, needless to say, wherever this hostility came from, the Romans are livid. So insulted. So they say to the military tribunes, could you please just go to the people and ask them to declare war against Veii, for I will not stand for such an insult.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I wouldn't either.
No. So, the military tribunes do this, of course. But they meet with a less than enthusiastic reception. And this is an interesting episode, I think. Apparently, the young men are kind of like, oh my God, seriously? Like, another war? Like, did you not realize that we're still, fighting with the Volscians? I mean, every year we're still fighting. It's just so much war. And you want to do it on, multiple directions? I can't even.
Guys, I'm still in therapy after Verrugo. Stop this.
My trauma. Yes.
Fair enough. I would be like that too. I'd be like, it's too soon, guys. I've already seen blood.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fair because they are still engaged with ongoing tiffs with the Volscians every other year.
I was going to say, it's not like things have settled down to the southeast.
No, Verrugo just happened. They remember that, and so they really don't want to go to war, and they particularly don't want to go to war with Veii because they know from experience that they're tough, they're really close, and because Veii is obviously an Etruscan power, there's always the potential that they're going to call on all their buddies, all the other Etruscan cities and kingdoms, and it's just going to get out of hand.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I don't want to do that either. I mean, there's got to be a way.
Yeah. So this is interesting, As of time of recording, we just recently spoke to a magnificent guest, Brett Devereaux, who reminded us how little we actually know about Roman military operations at this point in time. But I do think it's interesting that there is this story of the lack of interest, people not
the resistance.
People not wanting to sign up. It does highlight obviously the volunteer, somewhat ad hoc nature of Roman military at this time.
Yes, this idea that we've got a sort of a citizen militia that's kind of can be called upon, but also gets to express its viewpoint about what's happening.
Yeah.
So they're not just, it's not just a state military apparatus.
Definitely not.
Yet.
No.
It is kind of like a group of people getting together being like, well, we really should poke sticks in those people over there. And people in the group being like, I'm not sure I want to do that right now.
No, exactly. Ugh, I can't. Now.
I'm really busy.
Yeah. Really need to get some farming done, guys.
Do you want to eat grain? I want to eat grain.
Yeah, I would love to have some bread, yeah. So this unhappiness is made a lot worse by our old friends, the tribunes of the plebs.
Oh, no. Do we even know the names of any of those guys right now?
Of course not, don't be silly.
Oh. I was like, I don't have any tribunes of the plebs in my list, but maybe you do. No?
They're just generically troublesome in my account.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nameless, troublesome figures. I like it.
Yeah. Which is going to be the way, I think, for a little while. But anyway, so they, of course, latch on to this. They're like, excellent, we'll use this. And they start making a lot of public declarations saying things like, the Senate don't really want to wage war on the Volscians or the Veii. They're really waging war on the plebs.
Oh, this is actually a new line for them, I think. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a war on the people. That's what it is.
Exactly.
And I won't have it.
Yeah. And they're like, don't you see? Can't you see the pattern? The way that they're going about it is that they constantly keep Rome in a state of war, which means the plebeians are constantly having to fight, which means that they get injured or die, or at the very least, it's keeping them out of the city, often far away from the city, whereas if they were allowed to just kick back, sit on the couch once in a while, stay at home, not be distracted by the constant threat of death and battle, then they might have had the time to think about, freedom, how they want it, how to get it, setting up colonies where they can have land and that sort of thing. After all, let's not forget that they are apparently the people who are winning these public lands, and they should be able to vote wherever they want, whenever they want, do whatever they want. They do everything.
All right. Okay. I appreciate this argument. I really do. But I can also see how this is not going to fly with the elite in charge around here who are looking at the horizon, seeing Veii beating some sticks together and being like, look, if we don't do something, they're going to take this place and then we'll have nowhere to live. Guys.
For sure. I can totally see that too. I mean, with Veii and Rome, the ancient city of Veii is now within the modern city of Rome. That's how close these places are. And therefore, it is probably a bit of a, look, one of us has to go eventually situation.
Yeah. There ain't enough room in this town for the two of us.
There ain't enough room in this Tiber Valley for the both of us. But anyway, look, obviously, I agree with you. I get where they're coming from. I do. I get where the patricians are coming from. I also get that this is horribly anachronistic.
The best we can say.
Yeah, exactly. Probably didn't actually happen. But anyway, let's continue on because it's a great story. We're about to get to my favorite part. So they then start speaking to the old veterans in the group. Get them to talk about their campaigns, what they've sacrificed over the years. And of course, Dr. G, it's time for a plebeian to get his shirt off.
Woohoo!
Oh, yeah. It's been way too long since somebody ripped off their tunic and showed their battle scars.
I haven't seen anybody's wounds on the front for ages.
I know. I was very excited. A little too excited. But anyway, so they rip off their tunics. They show their battle scars.
I was in Fidene. I saw it all.
I remember when Lars Tolumnius was thrown from his horse by Cossus. Pinned to the ground in a place where the sun don't shine, if you know what I mean.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Now, the tribunes point out that there's barely any space left on their bodies for new scars.
We can't send these guys. They're not going to get through.
Which is a grisly image if you think about it. I mean, I think about people that are addicted to tattoos and get tattoos all over their bodies, but scarring is like a different issue. That's a lot.
It is a lot. The tunic was taken off and everybody was like, please put that back on.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, stop.
Does your skin stretch at all?
Be like, all right, we won't send you. It's fine. We'll send somebody else.
Yeah. Given ancient medicine, you're a freaking miracle. Anyway, they're like, what blood could they possibly now shed for Rome? They've already given so much. There's barely any left in their bodies. They're basically blue. And not in the good way.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. So these sorts of speeches and demonstrations naturally make the plebeians even more anti-war than they were before.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
So our magistrates therefore decide that, you know what? Why don't we just wait before we vote on this issue? I have a feeling that it might not go our way if we vote immediately.
There are some clever ones in there. All right.
Yeah. So they're like, insult must be avenged, but pick your battles, pick your moments. It was decided, therefore, that the military tribunes should move into Volscian territory with an army. Yes. And they were going to leave Gnaeus Cornelius behind in Rome, just to keep an eye on things.
Okay.
Yeah. The Volscians, not in the mood for battle today. No, thank you. They didn't even have a camp. They were caught without their makeup on, without their clothes ready, without their hair done.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
They were like, word has it that the Romans are going to be moving north this year. So I'm just going to sleep in.
Exactly, yeah. Can take a beat.
Take the year off.
Yeah. No, you can't. Now, so we've got one military tribune in Rome. It means we've got the other three out on campaign. And the strategy that they use is that they divide the army up into 3 sections, and each military tribune therefore gets to plunder and destroy a different part of Volscian country.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have a few details about this, but I'm willing to hear how Livy structures the narrative.
Okay.
And then I'll jump in with what may be some irrelevant extra detail.
Let's go with it. All right, so I feel a bit like I'm telling the story of the 3 little pigs. Valerius went to Antium. Cornelius went to etc., 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 etc.
I don't know.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
It starts with E, guys.
A ketre probably is. A ketre.
A ketre.
Yeah.
Let's say a ketre.
Yeah, I like calling it etc., etc., etc. Anyway, and of course they do the usual, like attacking buildings, attacking farms whenever they find them, causing chaos. What a merry lark. And our final tribune, he went to Anxur. And this is, of course, the fabulous Fabian tribune. Now, Anxur was the major target for this particular campaign. Now, I think the reason for that, Dr. G, is that I don't actually know that we've even mentioned this place before, and it's further...
I don't think we have,
Yeah,
no.
It's further south, I think, than they've generally gone. Like, as far as I can tell, this is even beyond Antium. Still...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you all about where it's located.
Oh, thank you. I believe that it's currently, if you were to go and want to see this site now, it'd be known as Terracina.
Yes, it is. So this is a place that is about 56 kilometers or 35 miles southeast of Rome.
My, you are prepared.
I am prepared. If I know anything,
I love
it's
it. Yeah.
looking up places where I haven't heard of them before.
Yeah.
So it becomes the place where the Via Appia extends all the way down to it. Not at this time period.
No.
But in about another 100 years' time, the Via Appia will head all the way straight in like a dead line from Rome down to this spot.
Right.
And it's on a really strategic location. So Italy has all of these sort of like mountain ranges that have formed through the volcanic activity and the tectonic plates and stuff that sort of go down the middle of it. And this is a spot where a set of hills becomes the cliffs that fall into the sea.
Okay.
So when you're in Anxur, you're on the top of a hill and you can see in every direction, basically. So pretty exciting stuff because it's in what is known as the Volscian Hills. And you can see over what is known as the Pontine Marshes.
Yes.
Now, this is the really super flat area that sits in between these hills and Rome itself. And when you're like driving around in Italy today, I recommend you do it, all the roads there are really straight because it's just flat land. It's like you've got these amazing hills on one side and then you've got the marshes and it's just flat. And you're like, oh, okay. So you've got like a really clear view for a whole bunch of things. And we think historically, way back even pre-Rome, wait for it, that this was an Etruscan area.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, back in the 7th century BCE.
Right.
And that it sort of splits away and the Volscii come in and it becomes their kind of thing.
Okay.
And they've been hanging out there. But Carthage also has a history with this spot as well.
Of course they do. It's coastal.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything on the coast, Carthage is interested. The Punic peoples, they're a seafaring peoples. So they've had a treaty set up there since about the early Republic. So this whole situation is really interesting because it is, you're right, it is much further south than Rome has gone before with a military enterprise. And they're now taking what is a highly strategic Volscian location.
Venturing where no Roman has dared to go before.
A small step for man, a giant step for a Roman military tribune with consular power.
That's right. All right, so as you've highlighted, because of the way it's positioned, this is not a place that the Romans are just going to be able to waltz in and plunder. This is a siege we're facing, people. Yeah. Now, as you said, there are marshes nearby. Like the city apparently kind of sloped in the direction of the marshes. So that is where Fabius is kind of positioned. He has no other real choice.
I was going to say, that is not the strategic location to start your siege, but okay, Mr. Fabius.
Yeah, well, that's where he's going to position himself. And he's getting a little punchy, he's getting a little keen, taste for battle. However, this is where our legate comes in. So Gaius Servilius Ahala takes 4 cohorts and he starts to move around the hill which overlooked Anxur. And he starts attacking the hills from that position, which apparently is a very good position to do this from because there are no real troops there to fight back. Maybe they thought that no one would take that line of attack. I don't know.
They're like, these hills are hard to climb. Nobody's going to come that way.
Exactly. No one's going to do that. They're also making a huge amount of noise whilst they're doing this. Okay, so a huge racket to the point where the people who are inside the city are like, oh my God, could you just keep it down? We're trying to wage a war, not stage a rock concert. Jeez.
I'm trying to think about what the purpose of the noise would be, and maybe to scare the people into thinking that there's a bigger army than there is.
It's a tactic.
Yeah.
So obviously the people who are focusing on Fabius, who's doing his little like jab, jab, punch from down in the marshes.
Why don't you come down here and say that? Yeah. I'll take you down.
Yeah. They're confused by the noise. It's very distracting. And because they are distracted by the noise that's being caused by Ahala, it allows Fabius, apparently, to sneak in some scaling ladders.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
No, exactly. And Anxur is soon swarming with Romans. And this is a pretty brutal conquest, Dr. G. They are slaughtering everyone and anyone. Citizen, soldier, armed, unarmed, who cares? You're on the end of my sword.
Okay. So this issue, this moment in time between Rome, the Volscians, and Anxur.
Yes.
This is one of those rare moments where we have a fragment from Ennius.
Ooh, okay.
I know.
Please tell me more about this early source.
Our early source. So Ennius is most famous for writing a poem called the Annales, and he was born in 239 BCE, we think. So he's 3rd century. So this puts him much earlier than Livy, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, any of the sources that we're reading, really.
Yeah.
And so this becomes one of these moments that we're able to locate because we've got a much earlier written source.
Okay.
So Ennius is somebody who is not Roman. He is somebody who comes to Rome later in life. And he speaks a number of different languages. So he is from what is ancient Calabria, which is part of broader Magna Graecia.
Right.
So he speaks Greek. He also speaks Oscan, and he also speaks Latin.
Handy.
And this seems to be like pretty typical for what is going on in Italy during this sort of period.
Well, yeah, you've got the Greeks in the south, you've got the Oscans on the... Wait. You've got the Oscans to the east.
The Oscans are kind of to the east a little bit, but they kind of spread like a little band that separates the Greeks and the Latin speakers, if you like. So he's kind of got like this sweep of things from sort of south to center in terms of his languages. This means that he's got not just a sort of an interest in Roman things, he's got an interest in the broader region as well. And he mentions this as, he mentions the Roman ladders in Anxur. And he also mentions the way that the Volscians lose. So these are the 2 details that we get from a different source for this.
Okay. Well, okay, ladders, corroborated.
Ladders, tick.
Tick. So, obviously, with Romans all about their city, armed, dangerous, etc., as they tend to be, the people who live there, they've got nothing to gain at this point by surrendering because the Romans are just too indiscriminate in their violence. And so it looks like they're just going to have to power on regardless, which, again, is not going to end well for them. But I guess at least they took a few Romans with them, right? But suddenly, the Romans receive an instruction that they're not to harm anyone unless they're holding a weapon. And so the people of Anxor are very quick to drop it like it's hot.
What are you talking about? That touched me. I didn't pick it up.
Yeah, that's not mine. I mean, sure, it's got my name inscribed on it, but whatever. Yeah. So this is how it ends. It means that the Romans are able to capture approximately 2,500 people.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, considering that we haven't really talked much about, prisoners of war of late, but it wasn't that long ago that they also captured, a few thousand. And so, yeah, all of a sudden we can see that with the Romans being a bit more aggressive, being a bit more expansionist in the region, we're starting to see prisoners being taken again, allegedly. The numbers are very round. That's all I'm going to say.
You're telling me somebody's not keeping a proper count?
I don't know.
Goodness me.
No. Anyway, so Fabius now comes in and he tells his men, look, you need to leave the booty here until the other military tribunes arrive on the scene. Okay? After all, this is a joint effort we're talking about here. And also, Ahala, he also was key. They managed to do the latter thing because they were just so damn noisy. So once all of the three military tribunes and Ahala, I presume as well, have sort of all converged on Anxor, the three armies then all get to lay waste to the town together because the family that raids together stays together. And Anxor is a real win, not just strategically, although that is obviously a big thing. That's the main reason why they want it. But it's also a very rich place at this point in time. They've been doing pretty well for themselves. So, it's a good time had by the Romans. It's a good day. Yeah.
It does seem like they've gone in the very opposite direction and quite far in the opposite direction, though, from Veii.
Yes. Well, I think you'll see why in a second here. So, because all the soldiers were able to come together and raid this very rich city and they've had their success, this starts to make the plebeians think, maybe the patricians aren't so bad. After all, there's no better way to say that you're sorry than with goods stolen from the enemy.
That's true. I'm feeling buffed up by all of this booty.
Yeah, and
it's
again,
time.
if we unpack this a little bit with what we know about the Roman army, or rather what we don't know about the Roman army at this point in time, because it is made up with people who are volunteers as far as we can tell, and they are people who obviously therefore, they go to war when they need to, but otherwise they're living their lives and that sort of thing. Being able to raid like this makes sense. This is probably what warfare at this point in time is really about. It's not huge state-run armies. You don't probably have magistrates who get to say who gets to keep what and who gets what all the time. It would have to be that these guys, they're not getting paid. So them being able to take stuff when they win a battle, that's their pay. That's what they get for doing this, for risking their lives and for leaving their families and their farms.
Yeah, and this sort of going out as far as Rome has at this point, taking this place that they've never taken before, this would be a real, I don't want to say cash injection, but that's kind of what I mean. It's like there's a wealth accruing there from taking somewhere new and different.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, this is where we get a very big decision being made, Dr. G. Mm-hmm. And nobody had even asked for it, which we know as women, that's what matters the most, right? That you didn't actually have to ask for it. So the Senate makes this big decision that they're going to start paying soldiers.
What?
Yeah. Yes.
No.
Yeah. So the state / public treasury are now going to pay the men who are fighting for them, which is described by Livy as the most seasonable boon which has ever been bestowed on them by the chiefs of state.
Okay. Now, I'm not sure, first, that I believe that this is going to be the start of sustained payment.
I don't
for
think it is either.
The Roman troops.
No, I don't think so.
The only other source that I have for this year is Florus.
Okay.
And Florus, he talks about this 10-year siege of Veii,
Sure.
the foreshadowing thing.
Yeah.
And he talks about how this is the first time that a Roman army has to spend the winter in campaign. So all of a sudden they're out in the cold. So rather than usually the idea of the Roman campaigning season, as far as we theoretically understand it, we have no idea how it's actually working at this point in time. But the idea is that in spring, you get together, you do the levy, and then you go out, and summertime is battle time.
Yeah.
And when things start to cool down again in autumn, you definitely want to bring everybody home. Things don't happen in wintertime. Everybody's busy trying to stay warm. To stay out on campaign through the winter is a whole extra sort of layer of challenge. You would need different equipment, better equipment perhaps, more weatherproof equipment. But if you're going to do a siege properly, and it's going to keep being a siege for as long as it needs to be a siege, you kind of have to stay in the field. And this is the moment that Florus suggests that because winter service was required of the soldiers, and this is in relation to Veii, so we might be getting ahead of ourselves here, they get compensated with a special payment.
Yes, well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You have jumped ahead a little bit in my narrative, but yes, you are right. It does seem to be tied very much with Veii, with the fact that there seems to be a much more sustained campaign. Is it 10 years? Who knows? But it definitely does seem to be more sustained than what the Romans have recently been doing, which is basically, running across borders with their neighbours and running back again. And certainly, so we can believe that there is some sort of payment. In terms of it being like cash, like we would think of it, like cha-ching, coinage.
Yeah. You rock up and the quaestor is like, and that's your check.
Yeah.
Cash it wisely.
Yeah, it seems unlikely that that's what's happening at this point in time. The Romans don't have coinage in this moment. It's more likely that they're getting paid in a sense of they're getting certain goods, and food would be the most likely source of payment, I would imagine.
Yeah, and we sort of get that sense that prior to this, the informal way of compensating people is through the booty system. So the idea that you go out, you do the raiding, you grab the other people's stuff, and that's how you compensate people, because then people either use that stuff or maybe they trade that stuff.
Yeah. And as was very usefully highlighted by Brett Devereaux, I'm going to keep mentioning him because it's just a very military episode. As he mentioned, when you have an army like this, the people who are going out and fighting, even though the whole account's been very much swept up in this conflict of the orders narrative, which we keep going on and on about, it probably isn't the super, super poor people that are going out and fighting at this moment in time. It's probably still people that are, relatively well off. So they've been able to do this kind of warfare up until this point. But being away on campaign for a long time, well, that is different. And also, if you want more manpower, then you have to make it possible for the poorer people to serve.
Yeah. There needs to be a way to make sure that it's possible for them to take the time.
Yeah. And for the state not to suffer. You do still need people to stay at home and farm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, so as you highlighted, this pay probably is linked to the future campaign with Veii. But that hasn't been mentioned yet, Dr. G.
But
the Senate are just giving it to people. They're just announcing it.
Okay.
The plebeians are so excited. This is like Christmas.
Oh, Livy, this narrative is wild.
I know. So crowds start to gather together in the Curia, and this is apparently where the Senate would be meeting, of course.
A nice public building, if they've got one.
Yeah, exactly. Men are shaking the hands of senators as they come out of this historic meeting. They're saying to them, you know what? We've had to call you the fathers, but now you really deserve it.
Daddy!
Exactly. Oh my God. You are my brother.
I feel like I'm your real son now.
It's just like all these years, it's kind of felt like you didn't really care. And now I see it. You knew what's best for me, and you are my father. You are the Padres. You are the Padres. Now.
Wow. The emotions.
Yeah.
They're running high.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's saying, you know what? Now no one would mind serving in the army. Blood, schmud, death, schmeth. Who cares? I mean, Rome as a state is just so insanely generous that it's just a pleasure and an honor to serve.
Guys, you've made it easy for me to say yes now. You really have.
Yeah, they're really extra tickled. Like, the joy is really, just gone right up there, because not only were they not losing money anymore when they went out and fight, potentially, obviously, depends if you get booty and that sort of thing, but it's really the fact that the Senate did this without being asked. They hadn't even been pushing for this. It's a spontaneous gift. It's like when your partner takes the rubbish out without having to be asked, Or when they put their plate in the dishwasher without having to be asked, or they tidy their room without having to be asked.
Well, I don't know what's going on in your household, but it sounds very exciting.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Now, the tribunes of the plebs, of course, not pleased. They're the only party poopers in this situation. They feel
Really?
like,
I wonder why. They've been undercut, haven't they?
exactly. Like, whose scars are they going to show now? They felt like the plebeians were deluded. They're like, guys, this is not going to benefit you quite this much. Like, take it down a notch. It's just one of those things that the Senate do where, sure, it looks good on paper, or whatever it is we're using right now to record things. But it's not going to play out that well in real life. We're telling you, this isn't how the senators work. This isn't how patricians work.
Yeah, you need to be more suspicious, guys. A little bit more skepticism could go a long way right now.
Well, they do make a very good point, Dr. G. And it's a question that we still ask to this day, which is, where's the money coming from? Huh? Follow the money, people! Who's going to be paying for this?
I mean, if it's bags of grain, if they're being paid in food, that food is being produced by the very people who it's being given to. So...
How dare you interrupt my delightfully anachronistic account of Livy, where we are apparently talking about money.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. He basically says, look, it's going to be the people that are funding this. The senators, oh, sure, they're so generous when it comes to making payments with other people's money.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which, okay, let's just take a beat. Even if we're not talking about actual money, it might be other people's goods or grain that we're talking about here. So I take your point. Yeah.
Either way, I don't think it's coming out of the pockets of the rich.
That's the point. Even if whatever we're talking about, whether we're talking about grain, whether we are in fact talking about some sort of valuable metal, whatever it is we're talking about, and I'm putting my money on the grain, it's not going to be coming from them. They're not privately funding this. The tribunes of the plebs also point out, what about the people who had already served? They're not going to be happy that people are now getting paid.
There's no back pay system? Come on!
No. They're like, it's going to be coming out of their pockets, but they didn't get paid. That's a bit of a knife to the heart right there.
It's a recipe for discontent, that is.
It is, yeah. Now, some of the plebeians are like, okay, good points, fair points. I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to wind back my enthusiasm just a tad.
Daddy, thank you. I'll write you a card.
Yeah. The tribunes then come out and say, sorry, tribunes of the plebs. I always have to qualify that because there are just so many tribunes at the moment. They say, we will make sure that anyone who refuses to pay any sort of tax for soldier pay, we will protect you. We will look out for you because this is not a good system. This is not fair. This is not what should be happening.
Interesting.
I know. So even though the senators are being very clever here, because as you highlighted, they're totally thinking about Veii when they're introducing this. They've been very clever and not let on that that's what it's about. The tribunes are also being very clever and foreseeing that there's a problem with this in that where's it all going to come from? However, the senators are determined that this is going to go through. So determined that they do put in some of their own money. And I'm using my flesh rabbits there because once again, what money? There is no coinage. And Livy apparently says that the way that they pay is they bring in uncoined bronze in wagons to the treasury. Now, I did actually talk about this in another episode, thinking I'd already mentioned this. But this is where we have to be like, really? Is that what they did? I'm not sure. Like, it's maybe, I don't know. But it does seem...
Where did they find this bronze?
It just doesn't seem like the way that Rome is operating right now.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I don't have a perspective one way or the other on that. But I think I have questions.
At least Livy knows that it should be uncoined bronze. But anyway, but they make sure that people see them doing it. That's the whole point.
Yes.
They're like, oh, this wagon is so heavy. My animals are straining to bring it in to the treasury. However, will I carry so much uncoined bronze?
The blanket that's covering it slips off. I'm like, oh, goodness. Is that what's in there?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't want anyone to know. This is meant to be anonymous. I wanted to hide my name. Anyway, so with the senators bringing in some of their own cash, for lack of a better term, goods, they also want their clients, I think, to start bringing in contributions.
All right, yeah. They have to raise funds somehow now.
Yes.
If you're going to pay people, you need to pay them with something.
Yes.
Regardless of what that something is. Yeah.
And it seems that they might be recruiting some of the wealthier plebeians to do this, which is really interesting because we've always talked about the nuance of the supposed conflict of the orders. So it is interesting to once again highlight that it's not as clear-cut as patricians versus plebeians. It's probably wealthy people versus other people, much like every other society. Anyway, the crowd start to see, of course, that people are bringing in their own money and that these people were being praised by the patricians for doing that. People of military age who are obviously going to be the ones on the front lines and who are going to be obviously benefiting from this, they're like, wow, this is amazing.
Sign me up. I'll go anywhere. I'll do anything.
Yeah. They're like, they're doing their duty by making these contributions and allowing for this payment system to be possible. So this starts to turn them against the tribunes of the plebs here. And everyone starts competing with each other to make their own donations. Now, when I say everyone, I'm presuming, again, everyone wealthy.
Every rich person.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, this is how we're going to get them on side.
It's at this point that war is declared on Veii. Because, of course, they have no problem fielding an army after all of this.
It's time, guys. We're bursting at the seams with troops.
Yeah. Now, as you've said, although we have to question a lot of the material from this early period, it does make sense that there was a payment of sorts involved in this campaign, at least at some point. Maybe not straight away, maybe straight away, who knows? But it probably wasn't something that the Romans kept in play consistently from this moment on. It was probably exactly because Veii is going to be a special case.
Yes. I dare say so. So whatever is going to happen, and at the moment in Livy's narrative, nothing yet has happened with Veii except the decision to go to war. But it seems like whatever is going to happen in Veii is going to be significant enough that Rome has to change the way it does things in order to pursue its military objectives.
Absolutely. And Veii is a valid military objective.
Look, they have been a thorn in Rome's side pretty much since the beginning.
Absolutely. Maybe even before. After all, the Etruscans seem to have been earlier.
That's true. Yeah.
Now that is where 406 actually winds up for me, with the beginning of conflict with Veii on the horizon.
All right. Well, I think that's probably an excellent place to then wrap up this episode. I certainly don't have too much to add. I think I've sprinkled in the little fragments of sources as they've appeared in relation to things. The only other thing that I could tell you is Diodorus Siculus does go into the broader Mediterranean politics a little bit.
I'd love to hear that.
And mostly focusing on Sicily at this point. So Sicily has been taken over by
tyrants.
Well, kind of. We've got a guy called Dionysus, the tyrant of Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
And he is now looking to expand his power and territorial influence. So he's sitting in a pretty strategic location already with Syracuse. But he's like, you know what? I would like to dominate all of the east coast of Sicily as my branching out process.
Yeah.
He's really interested in taking over Naxos, which is a little bit further up, Catane, which becomes Catania, and Leontini, which is a little bit further north of Syracuse, but before you get to Catane. So he's keen to do that and is sort of eyeing off how he's going to do it and facing some pressure from Punic forces because a lot of these places are being contested right now and the Carthaginians have a presence in Sicily already. So that's kind of there's tussling going on in the south. And that's it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get into it, Dr. G. It's time for the partial pick. Tell me, Dr. G, exactly how does the partial pick work?
All right. So Rome could potentially win 50 Golden Eagles across 5 categories, each out of 10. Let us see how they do, according to their own systems of valuing themselves.
But judged by us.
No, we certainly wouldn't judge the Romans. The first category is military clout.
Okay. Well, I think this is a banner year for that. I mean, they've conquered Anxur, which seemed difficult, and yet they did it with relatively little trouble.
Seemed to go pretty well.
It really did.
Once they got the mountain caterwauling going on, they were fine.
Yeah. La. There you have it.
La.
And I mean, it's also the apparent year that military pay was introduced. Deep reservations, but this is what we're told. And I believe it is corroborated by a number of sources, so I'm going to have to believe Livy here. So I kind of am tempted to give them 10 out of 10.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I could go as low as 8, but I don't think it can be any lower than that.
Let's say 9.
I knew you'd say that.
I'm always ever the diplomat. I think, I'm wondering what would be a 10 now for me, but I think it would be more than the taking of one place and the putative introduction of military pay. But yes.
Look, I think we can believe that they are introducing some form of compensation, potentially just for the time that they are fighting with Veii.
Look, I think my concern is, first of all, that in the very fragmentary sources that I have, the siege with Veii would have had to start in 406 because the payment is a consequence of a military situation, not the inducement to encourage a military force.
Dr. G, the patricians are way too clever. They knew that this would win the plebeians onto their side again.
I don't.
So clever.
I have high degree of skepticism about Livy's timeline here, even within the narrow bracket in which he's providing. So
Timelines, schmimelines.
it seems far more likely to me that military payment is introduced as a consequence of certain things happening. But yes.
Oh, the patricians are far more devious than you give them credit for. They are politicians par excellence.
That is not what we have seen so far, and you know it. Nice try. Yeah. All right, I'll give them a 9. That's fine.
Okay, a 9.
Then we move on to diplomacy.
We may. I don't know that there's much. Not even from Veii. Veii is
I was going to say, Veii doesn't try to be diplomatic,
No.
and Rome certainly doesn't try to solve that situation with diplomacy.
No, the insults are flying.
It's a failure on every level.
Yeah, unfortunately, a 0.
Expansion.
Ooh, yes.
I assume at this point, it's obviously hard to know, but the assumption that seems to be built into Livy's narrative and the fragments that I've got as well is that they get to hold Anxor for a while.
Yeah.
If not forever.
Yeah.
So this is the moment where they do expand their territory, and it's significant because it is much further from Rome than, say, something like Verugo and even Antium.
Absolutely.
Which they have struggled to hold in the past.
Well, fairly recently, as it seemed. Yeah. Okay, so what are you willing to give them, Dr. G?
Oh, look, I think a 6.
What? What? It's of strategic significance.
It's one place.
I know, but it's going to be just one place for a while now.
Which is, I mean...
Look, okay, how about a 7?
Fine.
Yay. I'm on your side, Rome. Together we'll get over 25 out of 50.
Meanwhile, I'll keep giving them low scores, being like, I just want to see more effort, guys.
All right.
Okay, the 4th category is virtus.
Okay.
Their idea of Roman manliness. Like how courageous, how significant is their expression of their masculinity right now?
Well, I think there is a bit of virtus in this episode. It's been a while.
We've definitely seen some scars.
We have seen
Maybe
scars.
too many scars.
Definitely too many. I have scars for life.
But I think as soon as anybody takes off their tunic to show their scars, I think we can safely say we're in a virtus moment.
We are. It's not the
because
best moment.
It's not the best moment,
Yeah.
but it is an inducement. It is a display in public
Yeah.
of how they've contributed to Romanness through their body.
Yeah.
So this idea that Roman manhood is embodied in a really particular way.
Yeah.
And one of those really particular ways is through that military sacrifice and the courage that it takes to not flee from battle. Because the thing about showing your wounds is the wounds have to be on the front of your body.
Absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't look good if they're on the back.
In order to count for virtus, nobody wants to see that you ran away and somebody tried to stab you.
Why I'm super curious as to why Olivia's like, there's not even any space on their bodies for more scars. I'm like, well, they'd want to be on the back.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe he's talking exclusively about the front.
I assume
but
that's
maybe
what he
it's the
means.
case that some of the skirmishes do lead to a lot of other kinds of scars
This
as
is
well.
true. This is true. But yeah, look, I mean, especially for someone who is a Roman citizen, and although I might be projecting backwards a little bit, but I think that this is probably true for this time. In theory, also showing your body in public is not something that you do on a regular basis.
Yeah, the Romans aren't into that. They're not very cool with bodies. We're well before the time that they come into like strong contact with Greek culture and really embrace some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But even when they do embrace the Greek cultural side, there's a whole bunch of Greek things that the Greeks are comfortable with that the Romans are never comfortable with to do with bodies.
The Romans are the people where they're like, look, there's a time and a place. And a status. And slaves are the ones, slaves and prostitutes and gladiators. You're all the ones that show off your bodies in public. Not I.
The Romans are an awkward people when it comes to some stuff to do with bodies. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
They'd be like, oh, okay, all the scars are at the front, verified, please put the tunic back on.
Exactly, yeah, put it away. So what, like a 3, do you think?
Ooh, maybe a 4.
Oh, okay. Heavy expander.
Hello.
All right, okay. Final category.
Our final category is the citizen score.
Well, they are
I mean, the
very
citizens
excited.
do score, don't they?
They do. They think they do. They don't know what's coming, but they think they do.
They're like, oh, hail the fathers. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, to think about all the times that the citizens have been so unhappy and all the Senate had to do was institute military pay.
The solution was right there, guys.
I mean, having said this, obviously, as we've talked about, this is presumably opening the door for a wider range of people to serve. So presumably, it's people who haven't served much before that might be super excited.
Yeah, look, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
No, we shouldn't.
I don't think this is evidence of a system of payment.
Oh, no, it isn't. But, like, at the moment, they're just like, oh, my God, it just came out of nowhere. Took me by surprise. I love you.
You know what? I'm going to volunteer. That's what I'm going to do.
See, you know what? Actually, this is very much this, I don't know if you remember this scene in Sliding Doors, and it's popped up in a few other comedies since. The idea that men only buy flowers spontaneously when they've done something wrong.
Oh, no.
I feel like that is what is going on here, Dr. G. The patricians only give something,
Pay the soldiers.
when they've got an evil plan lurking in their back pocket. But anyway, but look, the citizens are very excited. Presumably, this is affecting a wider range of citizens than we're normally talking about.
Yeah, and it does seem that on the flip side, the military campaigning that Rome has engaged in this year with Unxor has gone well.
Absolutely.
Not great for the Volscians,
Yeah.
but very good for the Romans.
Yeah, and that's who we care about at the moment. We can be sympathetic, but once we're scoring, it's all Rome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty good time to be a Roman citizen.
Yeah, should we give it like a 7?
Ooh. Let's.
Oh my God. Dr. G, do you realize that means that for the first time in a really long time, the Romans have got just over 50%. They're on 27 golden eagles.
Oh, well done, ancient Rome.
Oh, yeah.
All it took was a big military victory and paying your troops.
Being nice to people. Who would have known?
The basics, guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, what a high note. I cannot wait to talk about 405 with you. It's going to be another big year, I think.
I'm excited. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Partial Historians. A huge thank you to our Patreon supporters for helping make this show spectacular. If you enjoyed the show, there's a few ways that you can show your support. You can write a review wherever you listen in to help spread the word. Reviews really make our day and help new people find our podcast. Researching and producing a podcast takes time. If you're keen to chip in, you can buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi or join our fantastic Patreons for early releases and exclusive content. You can find our show notes, as well as links to our merch and where to buy our book, Rex, The 7 Kings of Rome, at partialhistorians.com. Until next time, we are yours in ancient Rome.